In this video, we are going to learn about migration, orientation, and navigation in detail. So first, let's look at migration. Migration in the strict sense is the seasonal or semi-annual back and forth mass movement of animals between their feeding and breeding grounds in correlation with environmental periodicities and internal physiological rhythms. To secure optimum environment conditions all the year round. In simple terms, it is the mass pendulum movement. It is the mass pendulum movement of animals between two habitats to ensure optimum environmental conditions throughout the year. Migration is one of the most fascinating aspects of animal behavior. Its magnitude, regularity, rhythmicity, orderliness, and close correlation with seasonal periodicities are simply fantastic. Periodic or seasonal migration is common among butterflies, locusts, salmons, birds, bats, antelopes, etc. In some species, periodic migration occurs in response to changes in environmental conditions. The desert locust, for example. On the other hand, some seasonal migrants take into migration on the basis of the circumannual rhythm rather than as a response to environmental changes. Most migratory birds. In addition to seasonal migration, some animals undertake migration as a part of their exploration and colonization of new habitats. This is the case with the European collared dove, which have expanded its range by migration through decades. What actually stimulates animals to lake on to regular migration is not definitely understood. Still, migration is believed to result from a complex series of events which may involve an integration of physiological process and behavioral mechanisms and an interplay of environmental, gonadal, and hormonal factors. Environmental factors such as scarcity of food, photoperiod, temperature variations, pressure changes, weather conditions, etc. are believed to induce animals to set on migration. Now, what are the major aspects of migration? The migratory behavior of long distance migrants is believed to involve four major factors, namely exploration, orientation, navigation, and homing for fixing their routes. Some animals, such as salmons and herring gulls, are able to relocate their exact territories with extreme accuracy or unerring precision. So, what is we have learned about all three factors, actually four factors, which are the exploration, orientation, navigation, and homing. So, in that way, the first factor is the orientation. So, let's look at orientation phase. Orientation is the positioning of the body or parts of the body of an animal in relation to the environment or in response to an external stimulus that triggers and directs its movement. There are two major classes of orientation, namely positional orientation and course orientation, which are the two types: positional orientation and course orientation. The former involves the proper positioning of the body in response to an external stimulus such as gravity, light, temperature, chemicals, contact, etc. On the other hand, the latter or the course orientation involves directional movements of the body with or without external cues such as prominent landmarks, sun compass, magnetic compass, echolocation ഇവയൊക്കെ കോഴ്സ് ഓറിയൻറ്റേഷന് ഉദാഹരണങ്ങളാണ്. During orientation, a flying animal may sense no wind but will see the ground pattern moving in opposite direction of their track. The angle between the track of the animal's heading direction is called drift angle, since it depends on the drifting of the animal due to wind. The angle between the track and the wind direction is called track angle. First one was the drift angle, then the track angle. Course orientation can be with or without external cues. Orientation without external cues is possible in familiar surroundings by means of kinesthetic senses. Detection of changes within an animal's own body by internal sense organs. It is used by many animals. Navigation of the desert ant is a typical example. The information gained through kinesthesis is called idiopathic information. Idiopathic information, as opposed to allothetic information gained from external cues. So, course orientation can be with or without external cues. So, when this process of course orientation is happening with the help of internal cues, then that is called as the kinesthetic senses using. But when it uses external cues, that is called allothetic information. This kinesthetic information or kinesthetic senses are related with the idiopathic information, but allothetic information is something which is learnt from the external cues. Course orientation based on external cues makes use of either intensity information or directional information. In the former, the degree of the response of the animal is directly proportional to the intensity of the stimulation, whereas in the later, the response depends on directional stimulation. Kinesis is an example of the first category, and taxis is the example of the second category. Course orientation is important in navigation, in which animals make use of external cues such as landmarks, magnetic, solar, lunar, or stellar compasses, echolocation, etc. Homing ants, bees, fish, and birds are known to use sun as a compass, solar compass, in which the animal maintains a course with a particular angle to the sun. That makes use of echolocation. Navigation. Navigation is the goal-oriented long-distance movement of animals toward a destination using different cues rather than the recognition of landmark. This is a specialized form of orientation performed by several species of insects such as locusts, butterflies, dragonflies, and migrating fishes. The apparent changes in the position of sun, moon, and stars in relation to the position of Earth are the orienting aids in navigation. Occasionally, Earth's magnetic field also serves as a valuable cue. Navigational orientation has three aspects, namely pilotage, pilotage, compass orientation, and true navigation, which are the three processes of three aspects of navigational orientation: pilotage, compass orientation, and the true navigation. True navigation. Okay. Pilotage is the steering of a course during familiar landmark. Compass orientation is the movement in a given compass direction without reference to landmarks. True navigation is the orientation towards a definite goal, such as a home or a breeding ground, using cues other than the recognition of landmarks. The long distance migration of fishes and birds use all these three types of mechanisms. A complex form of navigation is the light compass mechanism displayed by many invertebrates. In this, the animals make use of sun, keeping the angle between the direction of movement and the direction of the light stimulus almost constant. Bees use the light compass mechanism while returning to their hives. Different species use different cues for navigation. Salmon locate home rivers by smell. As in many fishes, it has been olfactory sense. Salmons whose olfactory tissues were destroyed could not locate the right spawning stream. Birds have the ability to make use of celestial navigation using sun and stars as a compass. Next topic is the homing. This is the return of animals to their home from great distances after a foraging trip or seasonal migration. For returning home successfully from a great distance, a considerable feat of navigation is essential. The homing animal has to set off in the correct time, follow the right direction, and keep up the correct course despite challenging weather conditions. A number of navigational cues are known to be used by homing animals, although the modes of their deployment is not fully understood. An important aspect of homing is time. Many animals use their internal biological clock to keep track of personal time. The internal clock will be synchronized to the apparent time at home. Other navigational cues used by homing animals include visual landmarks, polarization of sunlight, pattern of stars at night, changes in Earth's magnetic field, etc. Which are the visual landmarks, internal biological clock, polarization of light, pattern of stars at night, changes in Earth's magnetic field, etc. Birds exhibit Earth's magnetic field, all those changes. Birds exhibit high degree of homing instincts. They have admirable abilities to exactly locate their nests for roosting and also to locate their home country after long distant migrations. Pigeons transported so far away places are shown to return home on release. After circling several times near the release site, they fly homeward rapidly and directly, sometimes making long flights from an unfamiliar release point to the precise home location in a single day. If they make the journey more than once, they fly somewhat different routes each time. For a pigeon to return home, it must know definitely where exactly its home is. Then only it knows in which direction it has to fly. Pigeons do use sun or stars to make the right decision. There is evidence that part of the information is derived from Earth's magnetic field. Pigeons do get disoriented in areas where there are magnetic distortions because of large iron deposits. Some of the mechanisms employed by organisms for homing are the following. Some bacteria are capable of magnetic navigation. Bats orient themselves by means of a sonar system. Cetaceans or the aquatic mammals also employ an echolocation system. Certain electric fishes generate weak electric fields around their bodies to orient themselves in water. So they use magnetic field, its magnetic field. If in case of pigeons, when we distort that magnetic field by large iron deposits, their returning homing ability is to a greater extent decreased. Now, what is the cost effectiveness of migration? Animal migration has both benefits and costs. Some of the general advantages and disadvantages are the following. Advantages of migration enables animals to escape from adverse environmental conditions, enables the exploitation of the resources of new habitats, ensures sufficient food supply and favorable environmental conditions throughout the year, provides increased opportunity for sexual reproduction and thereby promotes racial propagation and population expansion, increases the opportunity for gene exchange, which in turn enriches the gene pool and increases genetic diversity. That migration reduces predation pressure, increases the adaptability by exploring the migrants to diverse environmental conditions. Heavy mortality during migration prevents overpopulation and thereby regulates population size. What are the disadvantages? Migration is highly expensive in terms of time and energy. Migration causes heavy casualties due to fatigue, exhaustion, predation, and environmental hazards. Now let's learn about migratory behaviors along with orientation and navigation in detail. So first one is the migration in animals. The migration is a movement of a population of organisms from one environment to another. The word migration has been derived from Latin migrate, meaning to go from one place to another. It is a sort of periodic and directive travel due to changes in environmental conditions. Thus, we can define migration as mass directional movement of large number of species from one habitat or location to other. The term therefore applies to classic migrations, the movement of locust swarms, the intercontinental journeys of birds, then the transoceanic movement of eel, but also of less obvious examples such as to and fro movements of shore animals following tidal cycle. The study of periodic phenomena such as migration in animals in relation to changes, climatic and other ecological factors is called phenology. Migratory behavior, study related to migratory behavior is called phenology. Phenology. The process of migration in some animals was initiated as means of survival, but later on, by virtue of natural selection, it becomes genetically fixed pattern of behavior and differs from species to species. This behavior was selected since it provides better survival, easy availability of food, better habitat, etc. Evolutionary model of migration. According to the evolutionary model developed by Baker in 1978, animals tend to assess the utility of their present habitat relative to that of another potential habitat. They migrate only when the utility of H1, that is the present habitat, drops below that of their potential habitat H2, multiplied by a migration factor M. The factor M is an expression of the cost or benefit ratio of the migratory act itself. Baker in 1978 proposed the following hierarchy of migration. Migration is of two types, individual migration and the species migration. So when we talk about individual migration, it can be classified into two types, like the accidental migration and the non-accidental migration. We will be classifying this non-accidental migration later on into two, like the non-calculated migration and calculated migration. Non-calculated migration can again be divided into three types, like the dispersed migration, exploratory migration, and removal migration. And calculated migration, which is a part of non-accidental migration, can be classified into two, like periodic migration and seasonal return migration. So there are many types of migration. When we classify them, firstly we will be classifying them into two, which are the individual migration and the species migration. Later we will be classifying the individual migration into two, like the accidental migration and non-accidental migration. Now we are going to classify the non-accidental migration into two main categories, that are the non-calculated migration and calculated migration. Calculated migration is of two types, periodic migration and seasonal return migration. But non-calculated migration is of three types, like dispersal migration, exploratory migration, and removal migration. So these are the various types of migrations. So what is something which is related to patterns of migrations? Diurnal and tidal movements. Individuals of many species move from one habitat to another and back again repeatedly during their life. The time scale involved may be hours, days, months, or years. In some cases, these movements have the effect of maintaining the organism in the same type of environment. This is the case of movement called tidal migration organism in case of crabs on a shoreline. Crabs move with the advance and retreat of the tide. In other cases, diurnal migration may involve moving between two habitats or two environments, such as that can supply a limited resource. For example, planktonic algae, both in sea and freshwater lakes, descend to the depths at night but move to the surface during the day. It appears they accumulate phosphorus and perhaps other nutrients in the deeper water. The hypolimnion, hypolimnion deposit phosphorus from the bottom at night before returning to the photosynthesize near the surface, the epilimnion layer, during daylight hours. The bottom layer is the hypolimnion layer. The top layer is the epilimnion layer. Seasonal involvement between habitats. Next one is the seasonal migration. Seasonal movement between habitats. Seasonal movement between habitats. That's the major one. So, seasonal movement between habitats. Many motile organisms or animals make seasonal moves between habitats. The parts of the environment in which resources are available change with seasons and populations move from one type of patch to another. The altitudinal migration of grazing animals in mountainous regions is one example where, for example, the American elk and mule deer move up into a high mountain areas in the summer and down to the valleys in the winter. Thus, by migrating seasonally, the animals escape the major changes in food supply and climate that they would meet if they stayed in the same place. In amphibians such as frogs, toads, and newts, a sort of migration occurs between the aquatic breeding habitat in spring and terrestrial environment for the remainder of the year. The younger develop as tadpoles in water with a great different food sources from that which they will later eat on land. They will return to the same aquatic habitat for mating, aggregate into dense populations for a time, and they migrate to lead more isolated lives on land. In this case, an individual may make several return journeys in its lifetime. Long distance migration. The most notable habitat shifts are those that involve traveling long distance. Most terrestrial birds in the northern hemisphere move north in the spring when food supplies will become abundant during the warm summer period, and move to south to savannas in the autumn when food become abundant only after the rainy season. In this case, migration seems to involve transit between areas that supply abundant food, but only for a limited period. There are areas in which seasons of comparative excess and famine scarcity alternate and which cannot support large resident populations all the year round. For example, shallows, which migrate seasonally in South Africa, vastly outnumber the related dense species. The all year round food supply can support only a small populations of residents, but a seasonal excess exceeds that the residents can consume. Long distance migrations may be one return journey migrants or one way only migrations as shown by the following examples. Migration in birds. First case is the migration in birds. In 1,200 Indian birds among 90,000 are residents and remaining 300 are migrants. Migratory birds come across the Himalayas from northern part of Asia and Europe to escape from the severe winter prevailing there and enjoy the much warmer and longer days in central and southern India. Ducks, geese, wagtails, flycatchers, and ruffs are important examples of winter migrants of India. They arrive in India in September or October and return in March or April. Tiny ruby-throated hummingbirds fly non-stop across 800 kilometers of the Gulf of Mexico twice a year. Migrating hoop is found to hop up a Himalayan pass at 20,000 feet. Studies have been made of songbird species within the genera Phyloscopus and Sylvia that exhibit a range of migratory habits. It appears that in the typical long-distance migrants such as garden warbler, the subalpine warbler, and willow warbler, there are marked seasonal changes in body weight, molt, test size, nocturnal restlessness, and food preference. The European population of this species winter in Africa and migrate across the Sahara Desert. Middle distance migrants such as black cap and the chiffchaff winter in Europe and Africa and show moderate seasonal changes in body weight and other migratory indices. The Sardinian warbler and the Dartford warbler are partial migrants that winter within the Mediterranean breeding areas, while Marmosa's warbler is resident the year round. And endemic in the Balearic Islands and the Mediterranean Sea.